Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much indeed for joining us today on our event on Sustainability Made International, how brands can drive global impact. My name is Alice Weightman. I am the CEO of Hanson Search and The Work Crowd. Hanson Search is a global headhunting business, and The Work Crowd is an online platform that connects businesses with freelancers, consultants, and advisors, both businesses across the communications, sustainability, and marketing space. So today we're here to unpick Sustainability Made International and how brands can drive global impact. In 2023 and beyond, achieving sustainability goals is a major factor to brands' success. Businesses need to implement meaningful sustainability strategies, meet the demands of global regulation, and appeal to the ethically conscious consumers. With growing economic and political disruptions that are challenging businesses as they grow internationally, how do they remain competitive? How can brands expand their sustainability impacts worldwide? So I'm delighted to be joined by a fantastic panel of industry experts that have got experience from the very start of conceptualizing sustainability right the way through to implementation and then communicating it to the wider audience. I'm delighted to be joined by Ryan Menezies, Edurne Gil de San Vicente, and Iain Patton. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Ryan is an Associate Director and Head of Sustainability at the Corius Group. Edurne is Sustainability and Programme Director at Water Alliance UAE, and Iain is a Director and Strategic Communications Consultant at Ethical Team PR. So Ryan, I'm going to kick off with you first of all. I mean, you've got a variety of experience across lots of industries, from mining, construction, and professional services, and you support businesses, helping them make those strategic decisions across the whole sustainability life cycle. But I'd be interested to know, what does actually sustainability mean? Many of us think about it just from a carbon neutral point of view, but what should businesses be thinking about when starting that sustainability journey? Ryan, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having me on this panel. It's an honor to be here. Yeah, I guess I'll dive right in. I mean, sustainability is quite a broad topic or broad concept really, and means different things to different people. For me, it's the pursuit of economic development, social well-being, and environmental protection, all with the aim of meeting our current needs without compromising the needs of future generations. It's more looking at long-term gain rather than short-term gain and profit. And I guess so a bit about me, I help companies understand their carbon footprint and how that affects their business, using data and looking at ways to make carbon reductions. So in order to start the sustainability journey, for me, the big detail is on data collection and understanding where you are as an organization or business before you can move forward and know which direction you would like to go into.
Great, thank you. Edurne, you've got over 15 years of experience in supporting businesses implementing their strategic goals and sustainability objectives. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your background as well, and what recommendations you would give to businesses looking to grow internationally whilst considering sustainability challenges.
Well, thank you so much for having me today with such an impressive panel and sharing this topic, which is very relevant and important for all us here globally already. Yes, first of all, I think that we have to answer to the urgency that climate change is really impacting our societies, is impacting definitely our businesses and economic systems in many ways, and how to become more resilient and transform our way of doing things. And obviously, first of all, we need to reach to a level of awareness to understand that urgency, as Ryan was mentioning before. What is sustainability? What does it mean for our company? What's our ethos? And then once we get this relevance and do a materiality analysis, understand how our core of our business, now what is global, impact throughout the supply chains. Supply chains are so big and so long, and how can we meaningfully help actually communities on different geographies. And my answer to that will be to act local, to really create a global impact. And in doing that, don't be afraid of creating partnerships. Partnerships and diversity is very meaningful today, and leveraging in non-for-profit organizations. We have nowadays global NGOs that are very strong, that have expertise, that have know-how, that has the connections. And even with a smaller local non-for-profit organizations who knows very well their community, their needs, and how their purpose aligned with the purpose of the organizations as well, it creates enormous synergies and really, really leverage the global and overall impact of an organization.
Thank you. Well, we can dive further into that later on in the discussion. Thank you very much. Iain, you help amplify compelling stories, often very quite complex situations around climate, sustainability, human rights, for international purpose-driven brands and organizations. And you've also founded the International Green Awards. Some would argue sustainability has degenerated into a communication goal. I would love to hear what your thoughts on that are.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, to some extent that is true. I mean, we set up an agency in London called Satellite, the Green Agency, in 2006. And, you know, at that time, there was a proliferation of green campaigns emerging. So all the car brands were developing green consumer campaigns, the energy companies. And on the back of that, we actually decided to create the International Green Awards, which was the first ever awards to recognise sustainability communications. And I mean, even back then, you know, there was a lot of sort of discussion around the use of green in marketing and communications and what it meant and what was truly green and what we would call it. In fact, would we call it the Green Awards or the Environment Awards or the Sustainability Awards? I mean, all these words are very interchangeable. Obviously, marketeers love buzzwords and jump on the bandwagon, you know, so we have words like CRM and these come and disappear, and obviously purpose, and obviously so many words, you know, come into the, you know, daily language every day. But I mean, obviously organizations like the Advertising Standards Authority, you know, have for years challenged misrepresentation and claims. But I think now what's happening is literally, you know, every brand is trying to be a hero around sustainability. And, you know, we have all these words like nature-based solutions, you know, natural positive solutions, carbon offsets. And often people don't know what they mean. They use it interchangeably with sales messages. And I think there's a lot of confusion. But I think it's about to change. And there's a lot of legislation that's come out in the last year and is coming out. So I think that misuse of the word sustainability, and ultimately there's a lot of risk with using the word sustainability. I mean, there'll always be a journalist, an investigation journalist somewhere looking to, you know, challenge you. You know, I mean, you could lose your reputation overnight. Information moves very fast. So yeah, it has been overused. But with legislation coming in, lawsuits against directors, really brands need to be very careful about how they use it and what it means. And of course, what sustainability means to us in the UK is very different to someone in Bangladesh. And it's only ever because we work with a lot of certification organizations, systemic issues aren't going to end overnight, whether it's deforestation, child labor, modern slavery. And really, it's a journey. So you can say you're more sustainable, but it's definitely not a guarantee.
I mean, that leads me quite nicely into sort of my next question, really, around that laws and regulations. I mean, I sort of see, people's job titles. We're coming from a talent perspective. Sort of sustainability has been added on to many job titles over the past sort of 5 years. Brands are kind of using this as strap lines, but there is more regulation, UK and EU regulation. So how are businesses dealing with that? I mean, Ryan, you come from a very much data-led sort of decision-making background. What's your thoughts in terms of new regulation coming through and how businesses can kind of navigate this?
Yeah, sure. I think it's firstly very important that there is new regulation coming through. I read recently, I think the European Parliament have passed a ban for claims of carbon neutral and eco without substantial information and data to back that up. And I think that's how businesses transverse through all this regulation, is actually by being transparent about what they're doing and also showing the data behind it. And if you don't have the data behind it, then be careful of what type of claims that you're making. And on the point that Iain made about sustainability being used too much and kind of meaning different things for different people, I've actually recently also seen Patagonia's released a post saying that they are actively not using sustainability and claiming themselves as being a sustainable brand, because they're trying to view themselves as part of the problem and not remove themselves from the problem itself, which I think is a really good PR stunt, but also a great way to look at it.
Absolutely. I mean, as businesses grow internationally, the whole global supply chain, is it possible to be truly sustainable? And is there a new way of having to communicate that? Iain, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a really good question. I think, we almost need to discuss the ethics of sustainability. And I mean, I've always thought, in a way, it's a bit of an oxymoron. I mean, nothing can be truly sustainable because obviously even green products and services are using resources, have complex issues around waste, whether something, has the right conditions to be composted, green electric vehicles with batteries that are sourced from, countries in Africa with child labor issues. So I think what we need to sort of have a debate about what is exactly ethical consumption and, can it coexist in capitalism? Because, brands have a responsibility as well to educate, and a bit like the drinks industry, say drink sensibly, really the idea of driving consumption continually, even if it is a green product, doesn't really sort of help the situation. And we have waste mountains, we have landfill sites which are overfull. I mean, really, rather than buying an electric car, we should be looking at car sharing, using public transport, sustainable mobility, walking. So I think no one's really talking enough about sort of, is consumption really sustainable? Can it sustain itself? And really, where's it getting us? Because a lot of these issues, certainly we've been working on with charities and NGOs for, 20 years, deforestation, global warming, human rights abuses. I mean, a lot of them haven't shifted. The dial hasn't shifted. We still have mass deforestation in Africa, in Indonesia. So, I mean, we're really sort of shifting the the deck chairs on the Titanic, because if you're using, for example, sustainable palm oil, it's still palm oil, it's still a monoculture, and really, is that the right thing? So yeah, I would just sort of throw that in there, really, is, you know, what about the debate about ethical consumption? Is any consumption, you know, really ethical when it's beyond what we need?
Yeah, so actually, you know, we're trying to hit commercial objectives, but is that possible in a the two are colliding essentially in terms of the objectives?
Well, there's clever models appearing around sort of hiring goods and services. Obviously, brands incorporating upcycled materials. But I mean, you know, we're sort of at the sort of peak consumption really now. I mean, the UK is probably the worst for the amount of clothes that we buy in Europe, and you know, it's having other knock-on effects. And for example, charity shops, where it's actually hard to find vintage anymore because there's so many clothes from, you know, cheap retailers. So yeah, we sort of need to take a step back and sort of less is more. And is growth really the most important prerogative here? And just sort of take a breather and pause and think, right, you know, brands could actually, you know, take more of a thought leadership position about, you know, what they communicate, how they educate people, get people to be more energy efficient, waste aware, you know, reduce, recycle. But yeah, the growth thing, you know, is a big issue.
Thank you. Edurne, what's your thoughts?
Yes, I really thank you, Iain, to bring up this important topic to the table, because this is what we need when we talk about transformation. It's not about business as usual and how to make it more efficient, right? What we need is to think our whole systemic way and put values in place, maybe as a society, what are we driven by and how we are respecting our natural environment. And I think that's the key of the issue. I a little bit disagree. I don't think that is the role of the producer to educate the consumer. Because there will be always a bias towards their products, I believe. But definitely there is urgency for corporates to go through an exercise of questioning themselves, what could be their transformation path and journey. And it's all start by awareness. And in that regard, I wanted to share the core of the issue is consumerism. And I don't know how many of you have attended this workshop. It's called the Climate Frisk, where through a gamified experience, everybody in the room gets to realize the consequences of this production patterns of consumerism, which is at the top. And is now driven internationally. There are many facilitators groups around the world. And I think in UK, there is a Climate Frisk UK. And you can just have a look at their website, and you can book a workshop. And it's really, really thought-provoking in rooms with different public. You can do it in your office, but you can also do in a more social context. So it's really worth exploring.
Thank you. Ryan, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with both the people on the panel, but yeah, for me, just my 2 cents, it's fundamentally, as a society, we kind of getting mixed up between growth and progress, and growth does not necessarily mean progress. And I think that's something that we need to figure out, really. What does progress look like? It doesn't necessarily mean more consumption, more growth, bigger companies, bigger profit lines. It's taking a really hard look at ourselves and figuring out what is progress, where do we want to progress to, and how do we get there.
Absolutely, thank you. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts then on offsetting. Is that a credible strategy? Ryan, I know we had a bit of a chat before the webinar on this, and what's your thoughts? Is that progress?
It's a bit of a minefield of a topic, to be honest. I think it's necessary, but I think you need to be very careful with how you do it. And the key point is it needs to complement a reduction strategy. It doesn't substitute a reduction strategy. But that also comes with a whole host of complications in terms of getting the project verified and making sure the project is credible. You need to be looking at things like additionality, permanence, transparency, social impact. So it's a very complicated question, and to be honest, I don't know the correct answer, but I would say if we have credible verified offsets that are proven to be permanent, it is another tool in our kit that we can use really, and buys us time, but it should never be a substitute for actually emission reductions.
Have there been communication challenges around businesses that offset rather than actually sort of try and make a difference? Iain, I don't know whether you've seen that before, or do you experience businesses who are proclaiming to be carbon neutral, but actually it's an offset strategy?
Well, I mean, I think it's good that it's being done in some respects, as long as it's been regulated well. But I mean, it's a bit like going to confession, being absolved for your sins, and carrying on, being the perpetrator of some, wrong action. So, I mean, again, if it's used as a marketing ploy, then no. And often these, badges do go on products and services. I mean, really, it's obviously got to be, purpose has got to be top down from the CEO. It's got to be, every aspect of the organization, from the workforce through to the supply chain, through to thinking about scope 3 emissions. So, I mean, it's good. Every company needs a sustainability policy. I mean, no business can trade in the 21st century without one, and it should just be one of the measures that a business looks into as part of its overall sustainability audit. I mean, I think any green claim or communication will always be up for scrutiny by, legislators, by journalists. I mean, it's part of the risk of communicating that, someone's going to ask you to substantiate your claim, and give a proof point. I mean, it's a bit like saying if you're the fastest internet service provider, you've got to stand by it and show how. So I wouldn't say it will differentiate. I mean, I think it's a hygiene thing nowadays to say carbon neutral or B Corp. I mean, it's just paying lip service really to the issue. I mean, it's no good if you're doing that and you're pumping out, massive emissions, daily. So I would say good to have thought of it, to have done some sort of due diligence, but I mean, it's just the beginning, really.
Thank you. And actually leads quite nicely onto sort of the whole greenwashing debate. So we've actually had a question in. So please do use the functionality at the bottom to ask questions. We've already had one in how to deal with greenwash. As an example, JBS supports financial NGOs in the Brazilian Amazon, but also responsible for the significant deforestation in the area. So we've talked a little bit about partnerships, local partnerships, but are those local partnerships greenwashing? Edward, I know you've talked a lot about partnerships. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Right. As I mentioned at the beginning, I think that partnerships nowadays are really, really important to accelerate positive impact. But we really need to be mindful of the kind of partnership that we make. Obviously, it needs to be aligned with our ethos, and be relevant as well to our line of business. It's not about being philanthropic anymore. It's about making a difference. And we should not obviously use NGO as in the example that we mentioned, just to buy our accreditation to operate in a way, right? And it's not good to have anymore, because transparency nowadays is very important for many stakeholders in the society. So, and it's the challenge of communication that we were talking around. So partnerships are meant to leverage really sustainability, and it has to be done in a way that it's very specific, purpose-driven, it's credible. And I can give a very minor example. For instance, there is actually a company, we were mentioning, obviously, fast fashion, how difficult it is. While there is a brand, a slow fashion brand in UK is called Thought. And this brand actually collaborates with another non-for-profit called SmartWorks. And the objective of SmartWorks is to help women that are underprivileged and out of work, to give them interview training, but also dress them because they don't have access to that kind of goods. So the brand Thought actually donates all the production samples, for instance, to SmartWorks. So women are now able to dress themselves for their interviews and it's just as a platform to enable women out of poverty, right? So this is what I mean by meaningful collaboration or partnership, where it's gonna be put to use. These clothes that are not sold are not ending in a landfill either. So it's being put to use. So this exercise of thinking, how can I be transformational, and how can I amplify my my business and actually my purpose, is what needs to be done to be also transparent and legitimate.
Mm-hmm. So some partnerships can work in those circumstances, and they're very useful from a global perspective. I guess it's about building trust, isn't it? Ryan, your trust measures are often with data. Do you find that is how do businesses go about getting the data that they need, and how do you work with them on that?
Yeah, I think data is one part of it, very important part in my eyes, because it's irrefutable proof in most cases, but it does get complicated with global supply chains, and yeah, you're not too sure, or people can't guarantee where products are sourced or how they're sourced, and if they're sourced ethically. The best thing you can do in that situation is really try and engage with your supply chain as much as possible, educate them, take them along on the journey with you, and collaborate with your supply chain to figure out how you can do things in a better, more sustainable way.
Good, thank you. That leads us to a question that we've been asked. Most of the products from Africa and South America cannot guarantee that local sources are following the sustainability protocols. How to protect your clients if something like this comes to the media? Iain, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitable that there is a risk on the supply chain. I mean, you just can't eliminate all the risks. And, some of these, for most products and services where, they're sourcing ingredients from, Latin America or Africa or the Far East where, there might be a plantation. I mean, it can't be checked 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So you have to sort of map the risks, the systemic risks, and these are deforestation, child labour, modern slavery, pesticide use, carbon and emissions, and have a policy in place. Sometimes, as I think maybe it was Ryan mentioned earlier, I mean it's almost better to sort of embrace the issue, and recognise it as a brand that we're working towards, for example, eliminating deforestation in the supply chain or child labour. And again, sustainability is a journey, it's not an endpoint. So, at some point, as long as you're measuring it and can demonstrate that, you've got things in place to address the issue and making improvements, then that will at least, help in if a immediate risk arises, and there will always be investigative journalists looking at these issues, and it's good that they do, because brands need pushing. We need, we're in the age of transparency and accountability, and again, these things are very difficult to eliminate. I mean, they're to do with complex local issues, local government, politics, cultural issues, children being, is normal in some places, helping with the harvest. So I think it's like accepting the issues are going to occur and having a strategy around your crisis communications to, address that, recognize it happens, and communicate that you are making a difference and you are measuring some point, some data point, and you set yourself goals to improve.
Thank you. Ryan.
Yeah, just a small point to add to Iain. I think in my view, us as consumers, we're not looking for the perfect company, and we're quite aware that there's plenty of work to be done. So I think the key is, as Iain said, is just to be transparent about it and upfront, and show that you're going along the journey, and there's still some improvements to be made, but just be upfront about it, and don't try to hide it and not say anything, or try to claim that you're green and sustainable and this and that without actually having irrefutable data or claims to back that up, really.
And I think this goes back to the wording, really, of like, you cannot call yourself green or sustainable. It's only more sustainable, or because I think consumers can be misled by some of these sort of regulations or certifications, etc., that it's an end point, and that the job's done, and it's a guarantee. And of course, it's better to have certifications there operating in these often complex zones than not having them. But consumers, just need educating, really, on how sustainable, for example, sustainable palm oil really is. So it's a bit of an education thing to sort of do there with consumers.
Edurne, what's your thoughts? No? You've just gone on mute.
Oh, sorry. No, I was saying that I totally agree. But also, from the consumer point of view, it's so difficult to navigate. There is so many labels and certifications, and yes, we regular consumers see a certification and say, "Oh yeah, that's it. It's green." And obviously, there is so many nuances and gray areas in all of the certifications. There is not 100% guarantee sustainable. It's impossible again. But yeah, it's from a consumer perspective, it's very tough.
Absolutely. A couple more questions been coming through, so I'll jump to some of them. One back on the topic of partnerships. Should big organisations and corporates be trying to work together more to scale up all their sustainability efforts, or is this too idealistic? So should they be coming together, all the big corporates? Do you think that can happen? Who would like to tackle that question?
I think I mean, the reality is that, you know, we're all part of the problem and the solution, and, you know, no brand or even NGO is squeaky clean once you sort of look behind the surface. So, you know, we need to sort of work with these big companies. I mean, you know, a lot of NGOs rely on funding, for example, aggregate industries, you know, funds, WWF. You know, we've got to sort of take them along the journey sort of with us. So yeah, sorry, could you just repeat the question again?
It was, should businesses come together to involve a kind of a collaborative effort rather than individually they're trying to do things?
Well, collaboration for sure, because I think businesses should also invest in research as well, and work with sort of NGOs on that journey. I mean, sometimes it can be done really well. For example, when Dove, you know, sort of use women of different sort of, you know, generational backgrounds to communicate beauty. Again, it just, you know, as long as they don't jump on the bandwagon, because obviously from a communications point of view, you know, there'd be inherent risk if it was just a temporary partnership, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Edurne, what's your thoughts?
Seeing an industry collaboration is like the dream, right? Where all together strive towards the same goal. And it has a lot of challenges because many of these organizations are competing in the market, right? But going beyond corporate or even non-for-profit, I think that universities are also a good way to look at, because right now what we need is innovation, and we need to really look at where the talent is to quickly find our ways through innovation. So anything that could be how to say launchpad could be really the way forward in any kind of diversity in the collaboration and partnership that you are going to set up.
Great, thank you. Sorry, it leads me quite nicely onto third-party accreditations like B Corp. Do you think they're making a difference? What's the sort of, are they credible and are they actually making a fundamental difference to global brands? Ryan, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Iain already touched on it a little bit. They are useful, and they're a starting point, but I definitely don't think people should consider them as a stamp of approval or a silver bullet that this is going to save everyone or justify the company or building or whatever it may be as being sustainable. But it is useful to have a framework to work off of. We're dealing with very complex issues, and some of these certifications break them down. And yes, there's gaps and areas that they miss, but they break it down in a useful way that people can understand and move forward with. But the key point being is that should be a starting point. It's a journey, and getting a certification one time doesn't mean that you're actually sustaining it, and it should just give you a bit of foundation in terms of your sustainability journey for you to springboard off of and get into a bit more depth and really make an impact.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions on people's thoughts on those that aren't convinced that sustainability is important. So I'll read both questions and then we can sort of tackle them. But how do you convince decision makers within organizations who don't believe sustainability is relevant or important and want to continue encouraging overconsumption? And the other question, different because it's more political, what are your views on the anti-ESG movement present in the US and some European markets? Is this a political action by specific parties, or a real reaction to policies and movements? So it'd be quite nice to sort of tackle those two in terms of negative opinion on sustainability. Ryan, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll have a go at the anti-ESG question first. I don't follow politics too much, so I won't dive into the political issue really. But I think anti-ESG isn't helpful. I do think and support that there's greater scrutiny that's happening, so that people really dig into the detail of these things and figure out if there is actually positive impact that is being made. I 100% agree with that, but I don't think the answer is anti-ESG and to stop ESG assessments or accreditations or anything like that. I think we still need to just take it and use it as wind in our sails and dig deeper and get more robust systems in place.
Thank you. Iain, have you got thoughts in terms of that internal comms piece of how to convince decision makers that overconsumption, encouraging overconsumption isn't a good policy to take?
Yeah, I mean, there was also a point I wanted to make about the earlier question that, a lot of charities and NGOs, are sort of single track. And really, if we're going to sort of be transformational in society, we've got to really move away from this sort of siloed mentality, because obviously Amnesty are fighting one corner, Friends of the Earth another. I mean, all these issues are interlinked. I mean, the climate emergency is leading to poverty, it's leading to, global health issues. And really what we need is a sort of a linking of these issues, because that we're in a complex ecosystem. I mean, as far as any CEO who doesn't believe science-based targets, if I was an employee, I'd be seriously worried. If I was a shareholder, I would be seriously worried. I mean, sometimes I think we've got to sort of take a step back and actually sort of talk about things like health and clean air, access to energy, clean water. It's not all about, the climate changing. And if it does, there's more immediate sort of concerns to think about. And there's lots of evidence from microplastics certainly up here in North Yorkshire, we've got microplastics in the Yorkshire Dales. We've got, people sort of massive air quality issues in London. And these are, so either you believe in policy and science, but of course this is the problem of the world we're in now, which is, information is the new frontline and misinformation. So I would always say, well, there's enough evidence and science, and you either trust scientists and policymakers or you don't. But I mean, I think it's, we're reaching the tipping point. I mean, we had the hottest temperatures up here last year ever, nearly 40 degrees in Yorkshire. And I mean, I just don't think a company is going to survive if it's not embracing a sustainability narrative. And actually, at the end of the day, consumers, they're quite smart. These things are often a hearts and minds issue as well. I mean, they will go towards companies who are doing the right thing, and we see companies like Lush who are, successful. And companies are embracing these issues, and eventually, if consumers don't move away, legislators will be stepping in and challenging them, and companies can go down very quick. So I would say it's I mean, start with education, but slightly shocked to hear any company that's not thinking about this and auditing their business. But from a communications point of view, just to sort of tie it back, I mean, it's again, you will differentiate yourself more in the landscape. There's a plethora of products and services. Someone's going to go for the one that is fair trade, or, you know, is linked with a charity, or is recycled packaging. I mean, it's just a common sense thing to, you know, be thinking about these things.
Yeah, and talent. You know, increasingly we get individuals who, you know, if sustainability is not on the agenda of that business, they don't want to go there, or they're looking to move. So, and talent is one of the key drivers success of an organization. So when there is a shortage of really skilled individuals, those skilled individuals have the say in where they go to, so they can easily start migrating.
I mean, some people are obviously, I'm not, obviously there's vested interest in society, and obviously that's why we haven't totally shifted to clean energy. But I mean, ultimately the successful businesses will be those that are navigating the future, and you know, it's not about, you know, as I said, it's not about climate change, it's about other issues and about our own survival on this planet. So yeah, like, do the right thing. That's what I say.
We've had a couple more questions come in. Edurne, I'm going to pick on you for the COP28 one, because you're obviously based in the UAE, so maybe closer to some sentiment that's thoughts. But how can we justify the corporate claim that they are contributing to environmental preservation when the newly appointed president of COP28 has ties with the oil industry? How can we trust the authenticity of their actions when the very sponsors supporting them are often the biggest culprits of environmental destruction?
Right. Well, thank you for the question. I think that this is totally justified, and yeah, it is very controversial. It is also difficult here in the country as well. We have a budding sustainability sector, and there have been a lot of discussions around the same question. So what can I say about that? Well, first of all, since the very beginning, not only for the link to the oil that has been controversial, is that we had a Ministry of Climate Change and Environment that is an amazing person, and is a woman. So a lot of questions had been raised why she was not appointed. She is definitely capable. She is pursuing her mandate right now, not only here locally, but also internationally. She's really at the forefront. And that for us, it was really a big question mark, what was behind that decision, why she was not appointed. On the other hand, the second point that I would like to bring to the conversation, and is also that maybe abroad we are not aware of that as much as here, yeah, the person that has been appointed actually right now and has ties with the oil company, he has set up actually what we call IRENA, is the International Renewable Energy Organization, and it's a non-for-profit organization, and it's launching all the renewable energies around the world. So they are mapping the best locations for sun and wind energies, and they are promoting those and unlocking partnerships, and also unlocking financing. So there is a will somehow to really get beyond the oil, as definitely, and there is also a will of bringing into the conversation the businesses and the private sector stakeholders as well. It can be perceived as a lobbying exercise, clearly, but in the other hand, why not? Because they will be actually businesses and the private sector at the forefront for driving as well change within their own industries. So it's very difficult to drive at conclusions in any case for me personally. But I just wanted to bring all these other pieces of information that might not be so much available from abroad.
Thank you. I mean, it leads me nicely on to sort of, can these type of events and PR and communications sort of raise the benchmark for social responsibility? Iain, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, of how, it can now be used to push the level up. You're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, we've had a lot of these conferences, obviously, since Kyoto, going back many years, we're not shifting the dial. I mean, I think, to be honest, COP28 is a bit of a circus, a lot of hypocrisy there. I mean, Sky News reported that, they're offering a sponsorship deal for $6.5 million to speak at the event. I mean, it doesn't set a good precedent to, hold, a global conference about climate change, in a country that is not limiting its oil production, that has indoor ski resorts, that, has huge carbon emissions, and it is actually sort of the epicenter of consumer culture and excess. I mean, so I think there'll be a lot of people who aren't comfortable with it, don't want to participate. I mean, yes, we do need multi-stakeholder engagement. We do need collaborations between government and civic society. But I think we've got to question how much is actually changing. What's changed since last year, since COP27. I mean, there's what's been ratified, what's really happening around global emissions, around deforestation, around not reaching the tipping point, around reaching the SDGs. And I think it's a bit like Bashar al-Assad being welcomed back into the Arab Pact. Who knows who's going to turn up at this conference if they pay to play. And unfortunately, that's the way the media is to an extent nowadays, because obviously we've moved to paid for play sort of platforms. If you've got the money, you can get the coverage, and you influence the information discourse. So well, would you be associated with it? Well, I mean, I think it's worth participating. I think things should have been done differently. It should have been set up in maybe a country that needed it more. And I think that they need to be careful who they put on a pedestal. Yeah, we've had 30-40 years of global environmental conferences, so I question it, how effective it's going to be.
Thank you for that, Iain. Just on thinking around current economic and political disruptions that we've been facing over the past several years, has sustainability fallen lower on the agenda for businesses? Are you seeing a reduction in that, or are you seeing it sort of maintaining its place? Ryan, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's obviously lots going on in the world in terms of politically at the moment, but from what I've seen, sustainability and climate change hasn't slowed down at all in terms of media coverage and people wanting to make a difference. If anything, I think particularly in the UK with rising energy costs and things like that, it's actually put it on the front page. Businesses are, even if they're incentivized for the wrong reason, they're starting to see by being more sustainable and cutting down their emissions and being energy efficient, they're actually saving a lot on operational costs, and that's only been exacerbated by rising energy costs. So from what I've seen, I think it's here to stay, and it's only it hasn't been overshadowed in recent times.
Good, great. Well, one last question I'm going to ask you all before we wrap up. What is the opportunity for businesses and brands? Is there opportunity? How do they get hold of it? So really open question. I'll start with Edurne, if you want to lead the way on that.
Well, the opportunities are there, definitely. We are living at the version of huge climate transformation on our living conditions. And we are not talking anymore about mitigation, we are talking about adaptation. Obviously, mitigation needs to be there, but we all need to adapt. And I would like to also take on the idea of local and regional city events. And I think coming back to my initial message is like acting locally will really drive impact globally. And yes, there is many grassroots movements that are happening locally, and also a new economy that can be created locally as well. We were mentioned before about global supply chains and how difficult it is to own them and control them. So maybe focusing on the local and can really reduce our impact as well. And there are events that can happen. There are cities that are engaged into zero waste lifestyles, and definitely that's for me, that's one of the key answers for everyone.
Thank you. Iain.
Well, I think for brands and companies that get it right, greenwashing is good, because if they have good environmental credentials, they're going to stand out. And really in the last 5 or 6 years, the media landscape has changed massively. So we have dedicated news channels, programs, segments. I mean, we've got everything from Bloomberg Green, covering just green stories. We have Sky News, the Daily Climate Show. I mean, even in the UK, the traditional red tops have gone green. So, even the Express and the Sun are sort of covering green stories. I mean, Al Jazeera, BBC have got programs costing the earth. So, I mean, if you've got a good story, then the opportunity is huge. I mean, for example, if you were to get on BBC World's business report, then that's 80 to 90 global viewers a week. So yeah, I mean, when it's right, journalists want first, they want exclusives, they want strong stats, and they love reports. So yeah, I mean, they basically will sort of like sort of sift through the sort of over promotion stories, and they want good human interest case studies. So the opportunity is massive for earned media. Thank you.
Ryan, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, just to reiterate from the other panelists, yeah, the opportunity is huge, really. And to be honest, it's from my point of view, turned from a nice to have a couple of years ago in terms of talking about sustainability to being a necessity, and businesses and companies that don't jump on the bandwagon will get left behind, purely because they just won't be resilient enough for the future and for future supply chains. So I think when you think about in that context, business is a lot about risk and risk management. And if you don't look to become more sustainable, there is massive risks. And as a business, you just aren't resilient. So I think the opportunity there is to create a resilient and strong business moving forward.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed, all three of you, for joining us today. It's been really insightful. I've really enjoyed it. We will be producing a bit of content to share, and people can watch this video recording again. So thank you to everyone for joining us as well today. And it's been a great discussion. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.